Hello, so for quite a while I wanted to talk about the difference between surrender and mindfulness. And the reason is that I have a lot of conversations with people about that, but also I found that on my own spiritual journey, understanding and applying the concept of surrender wasn't that easy. And it still is a learning process. But I also became fascinated by how the two, surrender and mindfulness, fit in together, and where is that joining point. So let me first talk about surrender, and then we'll come to how mindfulness fits into that, or is its own concept in a way. So for me, surrender is a mental process, but it's also a very personal process. So first of all, when surrender in its essence is about letting go of the need to control. And this need to control is governed by our ego, which is attached to the person. And if you are in a situation where you feel this need to control, then your ego will very quickly tell you through thoughts and emotions that you need to take action. Let me give you an example from my own experience when I was a child, bless my parents. So we were preparing a meal together, and I peeled the carrots, and then I started to cut them. So I was a child. Any child that you give a knife with to cut something, they will creatively cut. So they'll cut one piece, so that's just didn't really think about much, and I just did that. And I still remember that the music was going on, and then it was my dad, I think, who said, "Oh, this is not how you cut your carrots." So he showed me. So he definitely had a need to control how the carrots were cut, and I found that really fascinating. And my ego at the time would fight that and would say, "But why can't I cut the carrots the way that I want to cut them? And is it because there is a way how you cut them?" So you can see how this conversation goes. In my own life now as an adult, and even when I was younger, I could also feel this need of control come up. And the way it manifests itself for me is that I feel this tingling in my belly, and then it sort of feels like it's filling up. It's like bubbling, like boiling water. And then at some point, I need to say something, or I need to do something to take control of the situation. Now, of course, there might be some situations where there is danger and you do have to do that. But most of the time, I notice that it is not about that. There is nothing dangerous about. And if I would let go, I could let the other person live, which would be really wonderful, and I would avoid a lot of conflicts. So this is what I mean by surrendering to what is happening by letting go of that control. Now that might be really easy the way that I've just explained that, and you go, "Oh yeah," but it's so much harder to apply that. So first of all, the first step is that we recognize this feeling coming up, or these thoughts that tell you, do something. That's not how we cut carrots, do something. And instead of reacting towards that, to feeling into that, to becoming aware of it. And then when you become aware of it, to then, and this is the second part for me in this, how you apply it, to become the witness, to become the observer of what is happening in this situation. So for instance, if I would, let's say, look at the child who cuts the carrots in a certain way, can I stick with it? Can I stay with it? And maybe ask myself, okay, well, the carrots are not all of the same width and length, and the way that they're cut, they may be cut all different shapes and sizes. It's quite creative, it's quite nice. So becoming curious of what is actually going on. And this is where, for me, when we enter this state of witnessing and observing is where this mindfulness comes in. Because we suddenly changing our thoughts and emotions towards a situation or a person or whatever, and they becoming more kind and loving because we are in the present moment. And that's what being mindful is about. It's about being present, being aware, being conscious of what's going on, and managing that with kindness and lovingness. So these are the 2 steps for me, how I apply that and where mindfulness comes in. What I find also difficult is that sometimes it feels like you have to surrender all the time, and that's not true. And this is where I think the surrendering and the mindfulness are a little bit different. I can commit to being a mindful human being, a mindful being, and I chose this word very carefully because in our essence, our inner being, who we are mindful. We want to be mindful. We want to be peaceful. We want to be present. We want to be aware. We want to be loving, and we want to be kind. So this is actually a constant state that exists there all the time. You just need to relearn to access it. So that's for me a commitment to relearning who we are at our natural state of being, that we are mindful. And then surrendering comes automatically. But in this process, surrendering comes at a certain time. And there's a beautiful verse in the Tao Te Ching, 29th verse, that I think explains this really wonderfully. I've used that in one of my meditations as well, but I will read it out here too. Allow your life to unfold naturally. Know that it too is a vessel of perfection. Just as you breathe in and breathe out, there is a time for being ahead and a time for being behind. A time for being in motion and a time for being at rest. A time for being vigorous and a time for being exhausted. A time for being safe and a time for being in danger. And this sums it up so beautifully, that there is a time for surrendering. Whereas mindfulness, or being mindful, can be there all the time. So I'm really curious what you think about it, how you're getting on with surrendering, what do you find challenging, what do you find easy? Do you distinguish the two? Let me know in the comments below, and if you wish to do my surrender meditation, then go and click onto the next video.